Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool review / comparison for you, brought to you in part by the folks over at Belmont Watches out here in San Diego. They are a local dealer and they always have really cool, interesting inventory. Today they were actually able to lend in this brand new Sumo with the ceramic bezel insert. You can get this through them and their site, and I'll be comparing it closely to this Certina DS Action from my personal collection, because I do think that they are quite comparable in a lot of ways, but I think you'll be surprised in some of the ways that they're quite different. Especially in terms of having them just side by side and comparing their size and their scale and some of their layouts. It's definitely something to where it's hard to go off of just the numbers when comparing these two. So we'll get into, we'll cover the objective stuff, some of the subjective stuff that we spend a lot of time on, but most of all, hey, I'm a lover of blue dive watches, and this particular shade of blue with ceramic, I mean, it just really speaks to me. So when I did see this new Sumo option, of course, being a Seiko lover, I did want to check it out, although I wasn't sure if it was something that I would add to my collection personally. Whereas the Certina, I had a long time love affair with the previous DS Action diver that had the 28-24 movement, a little bit more of a funky case. So it was about time when they came out with this update in terms of me adding it to the collection, just to kind of keep a marker and a placeholder for, how Certina's doing at this point in time. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, another big shout out to Belmont Watches. We'll start out with this beautiful new Sumo, which is not only new to the channel, but also just new for public consumption. So I actually haven't done an individual review of this one. I am just kind of getting in a little bit of a comparo and giving you the review as part of this segment. So a little bit about Seiko. They were founded back in 1881. They're Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. This is out of their Prospects line. This is the SPB321, and it's a modern and premium update on one of Seiko's classic JDM divers. So typically within this range of the modern SPB line, you've seen them reissue really, deep into their catalog of old school divers. This is a little bit of a newer one, probably from within the last 20 years versus something that, was from 40, 50 years ago. So kudos and beyond, actually. I mean, you think all the way back to some of Seiko's divers. So this is actually one of the more modern releases within here, and this model was actually updated not too long ago to have the 6R35. It's actually one of the first Seikos to sport the 6R35 when it first came out, and now it's kind of almost getting like a king treatment by having that ceramic bezel insert. It always had sapphire, but now it's and actually I don't know if the previous models had the hard coating, but this one does. So there's a lot of value there. You can get this for $1,200 MSRP, or you can get it for $1,025 from Belmont Watches in San Diego. And I will say this personal unit, which is the one that they have for sale, everything lines up really well, and it's a looker. I mean, this thing is surprisingly nice. I mean, I guess I went to it expecting it to be nice, but they definitely have some tricks, and there's definitely some pride that goes into this model, and I think at face level, at a glance, I think of the Sumo, and I don't necessarily hold it in the same regard as the 62 MAS or the 6105, and all of these iconic Seiko divers. I just never really put it in that same air, but I will say the level of care that's been put into this case finish, this layout, and of course this revised bracelet, it really, for me, shows how much they care about this design, and this is a really important reference for the brand. So this does have a unidirectional rotating 120 click bezel with, of course, the loomed and shielded 12 o'clock pip, and this is a full ceramic insert. One thing you're probably noticing if you are a big Seiko Sumo fanboy is that it doesn't have that dip now. It used to have kind of an inner facet along the outside of the crystal, where you were just going to get a little bit of light play because there was a bit of a lip there, and now it's just kind of flat and flows, which, you know, it looks really nice, although having that extra angle did add some depth and some complexity, but I'm sure you couldn't really do that with ceramic as the bezel insert piece there, and everybody loves ceramic, you know, so why not? But let's get a look at this bezel action. Ooh. Very nice. Super smooth, definitely on that more Seiko style where it's more smooth than it is clicky, but it definitely does have some nice clicks. Feels super solid, very dense. I like it. Slow, faster, very pleasurable even through the gloves, and hey, it lines up, and you can even look at that sloped chaptering there, lines up pretty good too, and I'm sure if you look long enough you'll find something that could be slightly off, but I would say to my eye, if I opened a box and this was the one that I got, I would be extremely happy with that. So some more details here. The movement inside is the Seiko, actually first of all, screw down crown, unsigned, pretty typical for the Prospex line. The movement inside is the Seiko 6R35, which has 70 hours of power reserve, beats at 3 Hertz, which is 6 ticks per second, and it has a Sprawn 510 mainspring, so it is going to be, you know, non-magnetic from that perspective, and it's going to have a little bit of anti-magnetic protection because of it as well, because that's a non-metallic mainspring. The case back is solid. See, this is all new. Case back solid and stamped, you know, just like you'd expect. Nothing really new from Seiko from that perspective. But when you get to this dial, you can see those beautiful raised indices, very classic handset there. But the dial itself has this great wave pattern with this textured gradient to it, which is really, really nice. You also get the date cut out at 3 o'clock, and of course that ISO compliant pip there on the outer region. But on this one, it seems a lot more natural, because if you look opposite on the 9 o'clock, it looks like that's where the other indices start, so they didn't shoehorn anything in, no extra cutout into the chaptering or anything like that. So I will say at this scale it actually works really well and looks like not an afterthought, which is great. You get the polished hands, you're getting Seiko Lume Bright here, so looking forward to comparing those. 20mm lugs. This bracelet is new, and it is very, very nice. Check out that end link, the fitment, the just the sharpness of it. I'm really impressed with the sharpness on that, and it is directly comparable to the Certina, which actually looks very soft by comparison. So very, very sharp. And then you look at this 3-link, very simple. I wish Seiko would utilize something like this more often. Hopefully they will, now that they've already spent the money on it. I actually think this 3-link looks really, really great. Everything's really tight and looks quite good. Not quite, you know, Rolex Oyster level or anything like that in terms of it being super flush with a really tight tolerance. It just looks about right, especially for this price point at around $1,000. It definitely looks like they put some extra effort into this versus the previous model, which had a lot of, I'd say, contouring to make it look more multi-piece than it actually was. And then this is a pin and collar system, and you also get the very standard Seiko clasp, but it is you know, relatively new, and it is milled, which is great on the scissor portion. But what you're going to see here is going to be stamped, but it all flows and is very proportional to the links and is really, really great. So there's that, which we love now, new. And then there's this bad boy, which really stands up. And, you know, at the price point, at being slightly cheaper at 880 Swiss francs, or I got this one for about 845 USD from Masters in Time. And you guys can, oh, my thumb hit the camera there. You guys can check out, you know, this model for yourself. There's already a full review. So what I'm going to do is just very quickly, hey, Certina was founded in 1888 versus 1881. They're Swiss made. They're middle range within the Swatch group, pretty much, you know, similar to Mito, and kind of the lesser known cousins to Hamilton or Tissot. This is the DS Action Diver, Swiss made, ISO certified dive watch. DS stands for double security, so it is going to have nice shock protection as well. And it has a 43 millimeter diameter versus the 45 that you found with the Sumo. Although when you hold them next to each other, they don't, I would say that the Certina actually appears bigger at 43 than the Sumo does at 45. And then you get to the thickness, 12.9 versus 13.3. But again, I will say, even though the Seiko is thicker technically, it does more to hide that thickness by having these great contours and also mixing up the fine hairline brushing with the high polished accents, versus here you're getting kind of a machined side, which is going to be a lot more slab sided, which is, you know, although it is relatively thin, it's not doing any favors to itself, where the Seiko actually is. Now, getting into, you're getting, of course, very similarly matched in terms of you're getting sapphire, you're getting, you know, a shielded lume pip at 12 o'clock, you're getting that blue on blue setup, you're getting it fully indexed, so really diver oriented. You're even getting a, you know, sloped chaptering, although this one has a little bit of a deeper, steeper angle versus this one. And then, yeah, the dial proportions and bezel proportions definitely make you feel like the Certina is going to wear larger, and it does. Not that it wears oversized or anything like that, but by comparison, I will say that I think that's something to consider there in terms of how much dial real estate you feel looks good on your wrist. Then you look at this end link here, and you can clearly see that the Certina's is soft by comparison. Look at that male end link, and just the shape here on the protrusion, it just looks really round and soft by comparison, versus here, very well defined, even though it is ultimately still a single piece. Versus a single piece, they didn't do any extra tricks there, just one of them is finished to a higher level, and you can see that from the case even down into the bracelet. I will say technically the Certina does have a more impressive class because it is fully milled. Not just the folding section is milled, but everything is milled. Also, it does have a wetsuit extension, which is ratcheting, and, you know, therefore a little bit more robust, a little bit more versatile, versus the small diver's extension that's stamped that can pop out of here. So, and then in terms of movements, guys, very similar on that front, because you're getting a 70-hour power reserve versus an 80-hour power reserve. They both have lower beat rates at only 6 ticks per second, or 3 hertz. And then you also get a non-metallic mainspring with the Nivacron mainspring that is inside the Certina. So very similar from there, but the architecture for the movement, the 6R movement, is something that you could easily regulate, not only at a watch shop from a watchmaker, but even on your own, which I have had to regulate one out of the very many 6Rs that I have, just because it wasn't keeping great time. I wouldn't be able to do that with the Certina, but I will say that typically ETA does regulate these Powermatic movements to be very, very accurate out of the box. But if you get unlucky, unfortunately, there's really nothing you can do without some very special tools. So this, instead of you opening up the case back and doing a quick little regulation to it to see if you want to speed it up or slow it down incrementally, or even take it to your local watchmaker, this is going to end up having to go back to the swatch group really to get a good regulation on it. And then you get to the dial, you're getting applied indices versus the raised indices that are here that are typically just stamped through the back. And then you're also getting a good amount of lume that's applied there, and it's still ISO compliant. You're getting 300 meters versus 200 meters, BGW9 versus Lume-Bright, 21 millimeter lugs though, unfortunately, versus the 20 millimeter lugs here. And then these are 3 links in terms of the actual bracelet that are on the Certina are actually 3 links if you look behind, but they are not actually 3 links, they're actually 2. Essentially, this is a trick that Seiko does a lot, where the 2 outer flanks are actually 1, and then they have a center piece that goes over, so you're still getting the break and the high definition because it's technically separated, but it is going to be maybe a little bit of a smarter design, but also kind of cheating the system, versus here they really went for it. And if you compare the two in terms of the brushing, the shapes and whatnot, the tolerances, very similar. I will say that the Seiko is a little bit tighter and feels a little bit less jangly by comparison. Also, you're going to get basic friction pins holding everything together, versus here you're getting pin and collar, so a little bit easier, a little bit more secure long term, so a little bit of a trade-off there. And yeah, so with that said, let's actually get these. Actually, instead of me cutting away and doing the on the wrist, I'm just going to drape them, because this has, I haven't fitted this because it's brand new and I'm not going to fit it, but I can put on my Certina because it's mine, and show you guys how that wears. And then after that I will, looks like this fell off, it was from the inside. I'll put all that back together once the review's over. But you can see on my 7 and a quarter to 7.5 inch wrist, very nice. It wears like a full-sized piece. It definitely doesn't wear undersized and not quite oversized. So I really do like the way this does sit on wrist. And as you can see here, it doesn't, again, not overpowering or overwhelming on my wrist. It looks really quite at home, so I dig that very, very much. Now, by comparison, let's go ahead and throw on the Sumo just to kind of let it lay here without messing up any of the those ever important stickers for whoever decides to purchase this piece. Quite a bit of room still, so I can arrange this, and of course to get real close you're gonna have some lens distortion. It's gonna appear a little bit bigger. But one thing I've learned, and I've started to do, if you're a fan of my channel, my videos, is I do try to do more of the zoom in while it's low, so you guys can get a look at it on my wrist at a better proportion without having so much lens distortion. So it does have a relatively long lug to lug at 52.3, but because of the case contours, because of the dial, the steps that kind of go in between, because you do have the bezel that is kind of inset to the case, and then you get the bezel insert, then you get the slope chaptering, then you get down to the dial, and then the dial is, has relatively large indices that are, pushed more towards the center of your line of sight. It does help it render a little bit smaller, and you can see, my goodness, does it lay much flatter. Way better articulation because of just those beautiful undercuts that Seiko provides. So it definitely has a thinner appeal, as well as, I think, visually can look a little bit more proportional and a little bit tidier versus the Certina. And I know that's something that is just my opinion on this, but as a Certina owner, I'm not embarrassed to say that I think proportionally, I do wish that the dial was a little bit smaller to help shrink down some of this extra visual weight. Although there is a smaller version available, or maybe even two different smaller variations. This was really the one that's fully loaded in terms of spec. But with all that said, I know this has been a long one. Let's actually move into some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, wow. As you can see, that Lume Bright is blasting, but that BGW9 isn't too far behind. Still really well applied and still rendering quite blue. But there's a reason why Seiko is really known for their Lume, so I will give the edge to the Seiko here. But one thing, of course, I always like to work in during these pitch black Lume shots is actually some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you can be, coming in and out of buildings, just walking underneath the shade of a tree or an overhang, or just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it's nice to see what these watches render like in less and optimal lighting, so you can get a better idea of how these colors, finishes, and textures render like in more realistic lighting situations. And you can see the blues here play really well off of each other, where the dials are really complementing those bezel inserts well. So both brands did that really well. But that gradient on the Seiko dial does again help kind of center your eye and shrink some of that visual weight down, while still adding a little extra touch of depth, which is appreciated. And you can see, although they both have sapphire crystals with AR coating, you can see as the light plays that looks like the Seiko has a slightly better anti-reflective application, which is surprising because I believe it has a slight dome to it. So actually, no, this is a flat sapphire, so no wonder. Again, that adds to the thinness there. But very nice. You still see very legible. But when you look at the reflection, let's say off of the ceiling in here, the Seiko isn't showing it as much as the Certina is. Darn it. Why is my watch losing in so many categories? This Seiko's cool. I'll give it that. I mean, it's definitely impressing me, I think, more because I never really owned a Sumo. I've reviewed some Sumos. I'd had hands-on with Sumos. It was never really I was never really a big Sumo fanboy. I much preferred the SKX and the Turtles. And then, of course, now some of the newer kind of reimaginings. So this one was one that I really respected the spec on, but it's really gained a lot of respect for me just by how it's kind of handling by comparison to a very close competitor. Although, again, the Certina is cheaper, by a good couple $100. Even though, let's say you're not going to pay full MSRP for either of these watches. Technically, you can typically get a decent deal. Let me get a quick little dust off there. Let's get into the nitty gritty of it, guys. I think these are both really great options, and they are honestly legitimate dive watches. They're legitimate tool watches that have specs that make them very comparable to, more luxury oriented everyday style of watches. But these are, in general, you distill them down, they're the real deal. They're dive watches. They have the right feature sets. They have the right specs, the right layouts. And they are actually a lot more similar than I thought they were going to be, especially when you look at the bracelets and the overall proportions. Although they do a little bit of a different job, kind of mixing things up, there's still so much that they have in common as legitimate dive watches. And I really enjoy both of these. Of course, I do own the Certina. I don't own the Seiko. I won't even say yet, because I don't really plan on picking one of these up, at least not in this iteration. It's, very possible that Seiko will do another dial texture that might really speak to me. But I will say that the extra money you're paying for the Seiko, they're, I would say mainstream wise, most folks are going to know Seiko over Certina. So there's that in terms of brand recognition. Although Certina is a great brand and offers a lot of value, I think within the swatch group, this is the dive watch to have in terms of bang per buck. There are probably some cooler ones, better ones here and there. Of course, I prefer this over a Longines Hydro Conquest because this for me has a little bit more. I think the theme is just better executed than the Hyrule Conquest, which feels like it's a bit torn between things and trying to do too many different things. This has been a really long one, so if you guys stuck around through this bad boy, kudos to you, and thank you. So these are both great watches. I will say that there's a reason it feels like that the Seiko is more expensive. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. I was kind of expecting to go into this and say, hey, you know, I think maybe the time of the Sumo's rule it was kind of had passed, but it really charmed me. And yeah, if it wasn't for the fact that I have tons of dive watches, and to include Seiko dive watches that I really love, this is absolutely a watch that if I was looking more towards that one watch type of thing and I was going to have one diver that was really respectable in every aspect and very wearable and still beefy and, you know, kind of signature aesthetics, this could fill the same role. And that's kind of the idea for the Certina as well. Of course, I have a huge collection because of the channel and all that, but I think the best selling point for the Certina is that it could kind of be your one dive watch because it just has everything you need and want in a dive watch, which the Seiko, I think, also provides a lot of. So with all that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.